was I saying? The cube has kind of been a process of I will make a list of cards, and I'll be like, oh, I have most of these, and I'll buy the cards, and I'll be like, okay, that's everything sorted. Then 3 sellers will cancel my order or tell me they don't have a card. They'll all get here and be like, okay, in the time it took those to arrive, I changed 5 cards in the queue, and now I don't own those 5 cards. So I go on the card market again, the same thing happens. Or I'm like, I know I have that card somewhere, it's in a box, and I go looking in the box and it's not there. That's happened about 10 times. But it's gotten to the stage now where it's like, I want to talk about the cube. So I'm going to do that first, and actually I do want to talk about Ebog Prog a little bit as well. But I want to talk about the cube just kind of, because I don't know, I need to get it out, I need to release it from my system. So the cube, which I've been building for a few months now at this stage, it's a Peasant cube, which means just commons and uncommons if you didn't know. So because I wanted it to be affordable, and I wanted it to be easier to understand for newer people, because maybe there's a way you could teach people Magic with this. Now maybe they wouldn't draft it, maybe just do sealed or something, but in general it uses kind of simpler keywords. The cards have shorter text because they're not, you know, mythics with Yu-Gi-Oh paragraphs on them. They're all pretty simple. So you have the 10 2-color pairs, which is, you know, blue and white is flicker, flyers, and control, so all the enter the battlefield stuff. There's flyers, a bunch of good removal and counter spells, so you can play a control deck with it. But yeah, also, you know, flyers, so you can just not be blocked ever. Blue-black, which is probably what I would try force every single time I play this, is Reanimator, because there's like, Reanimate was an uncommon originally, or a common, I don't remember. Basically, they didn't have proper rares back then, so there's a bunch of cards that are uncommon that shouldn't be. But it's legal in Peasant, so it's in here. There's a bunch of other slightly worse reanimation cards, but that's probably the best one. A bunch of ways to discard and a bunch of ways to copy stuff in the graveyard. You can also play a control deck with this because there's a million kill spells in black and there is a million counter spells in blue. So you just don't let your opponent play. And again, you have a sort of a tempo deck because you have Death Touch flyers that draw you cards and a bunch of stuff like this. Red-black is kind of aggro with like sacrifice and stuff like that. So stuff like Lagomos, making tokens, sacrificing your artifacts, doing lots of damage, drawing your cards off, killing your guys. You got the reassembling skeleton to keep killing every turn. Just generating lots of value and burning through your opponent's life. Red-green, this is the Pierce deck, if I ever saw one. Summon big guy, turn big man sideways, do big damage, make lots of mana. Not in that order, but yeah, that's generally the game plan. And there's an Eldrazi kind of theme in there as well, because there's Modern Horizons 3 was a mistake, and there's a bunch of really good cards at common and uncommon that should not have been printed at those rarities. Green-white is, it's a go wide +1/+1 counter token strategy, but it's also kind of a combo deck because you got the persist combo in there with Kitchen Finks. I'll explain how that works in just 1 second. So you stuff like the unicorn, all the creatures that come and get +1/+1 counters. I wanted to try some of the Universes Beyond stuff in there. So there's this cavalry from the 40k set, when it says damage, you put a counter on everything. You do not play Gruul that often. I think, yeah, maybe it's like spiritually you're Gruul, but like in practice you're actually John Rakdos. Maybe you're more Jund, because you do like green. But yeah, the persist combo is pretty much any creature with persist and any creature that puts a counter on ETB. And basically you need a way to kill the creature. So the way persist works is when you die, you come back with a -1/-1 counter on you. +1/+1 counter will cancel that out, so you have no counter on you. So when you die again, persist triggers again. So if you have a way to keep killing the creature, you get to go infinite off that. So there is an infinite in the cube. There's actually 2 or 3 ways to go infinite, but obviously you have to go seek those out and you have to draw all the pieces. But I think it's good to have a combo in the cube for combo players to chase after. Black-white is, you know, going wide, token, sacrifice, life drain, that sort of stuff. It's pretty self-explanatory. If you've ever played Magic, you're making lots of creatures and they're very expendable. You're going to kill them off to draw cards, to drain life. A bit better removal because you're in white, but also maybe a bit worse in some other fronts compared to, say, like the black-red sacrifice team. Blue-red, as in every cube, is Spellslinger. It's what blue-red is known for. It's a bit boring in a way because, like, obviously you know to expect this. It's very hard to make a new theme out of blue-red, but there's also kind of a sub-theme of drawing 2 cards. You know, stuff like the the Mystic from Foundations in here that makes a fairy when you draw your second card. This does the same thing as he does. You're also making flyers off of your Saheeli as well. You're drawing a bunch of cards. You can kind of play a tempo, kind of almost like prowess deck as well. Bit harder to assemble that, but I did want that to be kind of in there. Green-black is all about the graveyard, but more so to kind of differentiate it from the blue-black Reanimator. It's more so cards leaving the graveyard matters. So it'll trigger stuff like Insidious Roots or things of that nature. You give all your stuff escape, but this has Scavenge for putting counters on. So it kind of works in both this deck as well as the counters deck. And Torture Resistance Insidious Roots is a very fun combo where for 1 black mana you just kind of get to go insane a little bit. But again, this is another thing. You got to draft these 2 specific enchantments and have them stick and play out a full turn. But I think that could be very fun if you do manage to get all the pieces. Red-white is kind of one of those color combos that makes itself. It's go-white aggro with a bit of equipment. If you've played Magic, you know exactly how that works. And the last one is Simic, which is ramp, of course, because it's Simic. But again, I wanted to have a bit more spice in there, so I made Eldrazi another theme as well. So you have the actual option, which I put down here, of doing maybe 3-color Eldrazi, because you're going to be in green, you're going to have a lot of ramp options, you're going to have a bit more fixing than other people as well. And there's Eldrazi in both, so you can find more Eldrazi synergies that way. You can also try like Jund Sacrifice, just by because green-black is really good at getting out the graveyard, and red-black wants to put stuff in the graveyard by killing its own things. You can maybe kind of combine those together. And the fixing in the cube is decent. You do have to go out of your way to draft 2-color lands and kind of cycling lands and stuff like that. But you could do it, especially if you're in green. It's much easier to do. There's the common dual-color deserts from Thunder Junction in here, and there's cards that fetch up deserts, so you can go get those with those 2. It's just 2 cards that do it, but if you find them, then that's an easy way to do it. You can also just kind of raw dog it and hope to draw the fixing lands, but good luck with that. Abzan, you could do like a persist roots combo, so even while you're gaining infinite light off the Finks, you could be making infinite plants that get infinitely bigger. Obviously very hard to assemble that combo, but it's there. And yeah, this is like stuff that hasn't really been tested, but maybe you can do it. 4-color Eldrazi, because you got Paul of Ulamog in black. Maybe a reason to splash yet a 4th color. And then a bunch of 3-color stuff. So I actually want to look at the list as well now. Talk about kind of some of the cards in each color that I think are kind of interesting because maybe they work in more than 1 color. So it's a good example here. So Novice Inspector, you can play this in like the sacrifice deck because it makes a second thing for you to sacrifice. Stuff like that. So it's kind of 2 bodies. It makes 2 rectangles that you put on the field, the creature and the token. And cards like that, they're good everywhere. It's good in a control deck because it's a mana sink for drawing more cards. It's good in sacrifice because it's an artifact to sacrifice and a creature to sacrifice. It's good in aggro because it's a cheap creature. If you put a counter on this, all of a sudden it's a 2/3 that's swinging, and that's kind of annoying to block for a 1-mana creature. We have stuff like the Ruin Lurker Bat. So Flying and Lifelink, it's just a Healer's Hawk with upside added on. But a creature like that, it's really good in, you know, your blue-white Flyers deck because it gets over everything. It's really good in your counters deck again because putting counters on the Flying Lifelink creature means more lifelink, and putting equipment on it is really good for the red-white equipment deck. And that sort of creature where 3 or 4 decks might want that, I think makes the draft a lot more interesting because you can read those 10-color pairs and you're like, okay, my deck kind of builds itself. But I really wanted to have these kind of creatures where they're in demand from several people at the table, so you can't really predict who's going to take what or why they're taking it. And I think that's kind of a good thing to have. I think you don't want the drafting process to be kind of brain dead and automatic because the actual picking the cards is half the game. It's like the appeal of draft in general. And I think it's an issue I've been having with Yu-Gi-Oh! Cube is it's very hard to include a lot of popular Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards because they're very archetype dependent. And if you lean too heavily into the archetypes or even certain extra mechanics, it starts to kind of railroad your choices for you. So I find it's very hard to make a modern style Yu-Gi-Oh! Cube. I think what you got to do for that is the type of cards Pierce has been looking into for the idea he's been having recently, which maybe we'll talk about at some point, which is the draft chaff, the unpicked pack filler from all the more modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Sets have much more open-ended effects and they're cards nobody has read before. And I think making a Yu-Gi-Oh! Cube that has those kind of cards in them has a lot of potential and something I really do want to look into. But I'm going to keep going down the line here and looking at more cards here. The standard Glyph Elemental, I think this is just a really cool one. It's from Modern Horizons. So it puts counters on itself. It's an enchantment, and there's no enchantment theme in here at the moment, but having these cards in here leaves the door open for me kind of putting in that theme slowly, and maybe over time that sort of theme will grow in the cube. But it's also a +1/+1 counter synergy. It has landfall synergies, so it's just kind of a thing you can play in anything. The type of creatures that want to be equipped also probably want to be enchanted by this, so the equipment deck might also like this. Good cards to equip, just some examples of those would be stuff like Shrike Force, because it's just a 1/3 flyer with 3 keywords on it. Put an equipment on this that gives it +2, +0, and all of a sudden it's a flying 3/3 double strike vigilance, so it's hitting you for 6 and it has vigilance and in the air. It's very difficult to deal with. We have very obvious signposts here, like Flicker Wisp is for the blink deck, but then we have stuff like, you know, Witch Enchanter, great in the blink deck because they can keep blinking it, but also it's just a land and everyone wants a land that does something else on the other side. It's also, you know, it's a creature. It is a human, and human is a theme you can kind of buff up in the cube as well. I tried to put a Planeswalker in most of the colors. I couldn't find one. There's like one uncommon black Planeswalker, and it's just not that great, so he's not in there. Blue ended up with 2, because blue privilege, I guess. They printed in our set. But yeah, white, it has some really fucked up removal at uncommon. Path to Exile, this version is rare, but the card has been an uncommon, which is why it's in here. That is the rule in general. There's some cards in here you might see the printing itself is actually rare, but if it's ever been printed at uncommon or lower, then it's in here. White has, you know, enchantment-based removal. These are great for the Flicker deck. Stuff like Touch the Spirit Realm, these kind of dual-purpose cards. So this is either like a Banishing Light, or you can cycle it and make it a Flicker card for your own stuff, which is really cool. For blue, this made it in at the last minute. This is from the new Jumpstart set. So it's a 1/3 for 1 mana, so it's an amazing blocker. If they target it, it dies. They're not going to feel good about spending a kill spell on a 1/3. So even if they do target, you don't care, because when it dies, it draws a card. I think this thing is incredible. Uncommon. I think this is actually nuts. I'm very excited to try this out. I'm hoping we can get a group to test this soon and maybe record it. I would really love that. I've been kind of doing solo tests. I won't say at work, but you can figure out when I'm doing them. Does that work? And I'm going to make a small changes kind of based on what I do. And I've been trying to get into the mentality of, okay, I hate blue-black Reanimator. What would I pick if I felt that way? And I try to force certain archetypes or try think outside the box and try to think, okay, what does the type of person who thinks like this, what would they try pick? And obviously I'm only one person, so I'm going to be biased, so I need to get other people on this immediately so that we can try out some other things. So Brineborn Cutthroat, this is another one that I think you could play as a good creature in kind of a draw go control deck, but also would be good in like a prowess type deck. We actually just pulled this in the Foundations packs just a minute ago. But this is one where, you know, you can play it at instant speed and you can play all your kill spells in your opponent's turn, so this thing gets bigger and they have to deal with it. But if they're spending cards on this, they're spending less cards trying to actually kill you, which is the annoying thing about control. But also, every time you're doing something, it's buffing itself up. And I think I have Monstrous Rage in here. This is a great Monstrous Rage target because you cast it on, you know, their turn or whatever, and you go to swing with it on your turn, and then, or you block with it, sorry, on their turn, and you Monstrous Rage it, gets a counter, becomes a 3/2, Monstrous Rage makes it a 5/2, which is just, it's going to block and kill anything. Just these annoying little combat tricks, and I think keeping combat tricks as a part of the game is kind of important. It's like they only really see play in Cube and Limited. We have just annoying shit like Cloud of Fairies, great for the Blink deck, great for just your Flyers deck. Stuff like Malcolm, this is a great commander card, but playing it in, you know, a 1v1 format is pretty interesting, because there are other pirates in here. I do believe stuff like Spyglass Siren and the Brineborn Cutthroat and the Spectral Setter. There's actually a few. So there is a pirate synergy there. It's not intended that you can make a pirate deck, although there are pirates, I think, in red too. It's mostly going to trigger off of itself, but a 2/2 flyer that generates a mana every time it attacks is pretty good, to be quite honest. We do have a clone card in here, Mirror Image, and this is one that you can blink in the blue-white deck. You can reanimate this and keep doing stupid shit with it in blue-black. Just a great target for that sort of stuff. Another great thing to do those same two things to is Archaeomancer. There's a lot of those annoying kind of type of cards in blue. We have Budget Snapcaster Mage here, Slickshot Lockpicker. We have massive top-end threats for the Spellslinger deck, stuff like Eddie Crab, sorry, this is more for Reanimator, and Sailor's Bane. These are just massive creatures that get really easy to cast if you have lots of instant sorceries. But there's also stuff like, you know, this bins itself so you can bring it back. Muldrifter is a great reanimation target as well as a blink target. A lot of that type of stuff. There's also Heralds of Tzeentch here. It seems very strange for blue to have just a big Cascader, but this is kind of something you might want to be doing if you're in the Simic ramp deck, because you want to be casting a big 5-drop Cascade, because this will probably hit more ramp for you, so you ramp even faster. And we have all the usual broken blue commons, like, you know, Brainstorm, Counterspell. I don't own the Doctor Strange art, so I just, you know, I thought I'd throw it in there. Also fun stuff like this town ain't big enough, so you can cast this for very cheap if you want to target your own stuff, so you can bounce back something like a Nurturing Pixie, you know, which will bounce your other stuff back to hand, so you really care about your ETBs. There's a kind of a dual purpose in that. And again, those dual purposes, it's something I really like to focus on. Lorien Revealed, you know, the broken Lord of the Rings cards, there's a few of them in here as well. And we do have a Snatch Steal in here, if you want to call it that. Control Magic. Black, it's a lot of what you expect. Bunch of really great sacrifice guys, stuff like Carrion Feeder. Stitcher Suppliers is a great self-milling card for the Reanimator and the Golgari Grave deck as well. Stuff like a Cursed Marauder is the cheapest version of that double edict effect you can get. Another great one to keep reanimating if you can do it. Reassembling Skeleton, one of the more... This one I think will be in high demand. I feel like if you're in any sort of grave strategy at all, you're picking this every time, because 2 mana, free creature, basically every turn until they deal with it somehow. There are ways to deal with the graveyard in here. I made sure I did have those available in the cube. We have stuff like Leering Apprentice. This is another one that's very clearly for the graveyard deck, the Golgari one most. They're going to want it most, but at the same time, it's a flyer, it's evasive. Any deck kind of likes the ability of just being able to flashback and do things with this. Maybe you play this in blue-black as well. You have stuff like Thought Scour to mill yourself and draw cards. If you mill this over, you feel great. It's basically a flashback card. Think Twice is actually another one that's like that as well. And maybe you could assemble some sort of Sultai flashback Gravebreak pile. It's another thing you can try to do, because I'll get to it in a minute. There's a lot of fixing in the cube. We have stuff like Big Game Hunter. This is like the only Madness card, but there is looting effects in blue and black, so maybe that's something you can do. Another great one to reanimate as well. We have Yeheni, which was downgraded to an uncommon in Commander Masters, which I think is crazy. 2/2 haster that can make itself indestructible by sacking creatures. And when your opponent's creatures die, it gets bigger and bigger, so this thing can be very scary to deal with in, you know, Peasant format. Gonti is the same treatment, got downshifted to uncommon. Steal shit off the top of your opponent's deck, which feels great in a singleton format because you know they're never getting that shit back. Pitiless Plunder, just a fun one to have for your long sacrifice combos. We have fun stuff to reanimate here, stuff like Skin Render, which put 3 -1 counters on something, so either make their boss useless or just completely kill something. As the Skin Render dies, you reanimate, you do it again. You can also flicker this if you want to splash into black in the flicker deck, but it's 2 black pips, so it's going to be very difficult to do that. Tormod is basically another copy of your Insidious Roots type effect. I wanted it so that there was like, you didn't just have to find roots, there's other ways to kind of pay off for that strategy. We have more great reanimation and flicker target stuff like Shriek Maw. Stuff like, yeah, Archery into Sorrows gives everything -2/-2. And Hollow Marauder, very, very annoying thing to keep bringing back. We have some fun stuff in here. We Booster Tutor in black. I want to buy a couple of packs of different sets, just have them sitting next to the cube, so that when someone Booster Tutors, maybe they actually have a real Magic pack to open and they aren't just taking packs out of the cube. Because that is kind of the fallback, is they just get a random 15-card pile from what's undrafted and they take from that. We'll see how it actually works in practice. Some of the more broken, black removal spells from Through Magic, stuff like Fatal Push, Bitter Triumph, just really good common and uncommon removal. I like to have a lot of these dual land cards in here, so 4 mana, it's a bit overcosted for a kill spell in a vacuum, but having a land on the other side could be really good. Maybe you go down to 16 lands, something like this. Stuff out, it's your free removal spell. Thank you, Doctor Who, for the reprint on that. We have a lot of reanimation spells in the back. So we have Reanimate, we have Unearth, we have Victimize, Dread Return, and I thought there was one more. Maybe it was an instant. Oh, they're under the enchantments. So there's Animate Dead and Necromancy. I considered Dance with the Dead, but I didn't want to buy a copy of that. And Necromancy was just reprinted in Karlov Manor in the Commander deck, so that was a great pickup for me. And then Defiled Crypt. This is another type of Insidious Roots type of effect where it's like, I care about stuff leaving the graveyard. It also enables itself if you unlock the other side of its second. But at worst, this is 1 mana, get back something from your graveyard, which I think is honestly really, really good. The red cards, we have Dragon's Rage Channeler. This is one where I thought I owned one, and it turns out I didn't, so I gotta go back on card market very soon and buy this. Stuff from Bloomburrow, like the Heartfire Hero, this is tearing up standard at the moment as far as I know, so stuff like that. The Surreal All-Stars in the red one drops 2 mana, Swift Spear, Phoenix Chick. The Reinforced Ronin, I think, is a bit of a placeholder. I want to find a better thing, but in my current collection, this is just funny. I don't know, I kind of like the card. I don't think it's amazing, but it's just, placeholder, we'll say. We have stuff like, Coruscation Mage is a payoff for the spells deck, and you can make 2 copies of it if you really care about that. Another one, card with double prowess on the back side of it. We have token generators like the Mog War Marshal, Piggy Bank, which you can kill and get a treasure, and then maybe you can use that treasure to get back some way to get this back, and maybe loop it somehow. I'm sure there's a way to do that. We have aggro enablers like the Pyro Surfer. Some of the artifact synergies in here is a bit of an artifact sub-theme in red and black, but it's a bit hard to draft. Kind of don't want it to be a big kind of part of the cube. I would have to change a lot to fit in a proper artifact sub-theme, because I feel like you would also need to put that in blue, because blue is just better at doing artifact stuff than most other colors. We've broken stuff like Young Pyromancer. Just every time you do an sorcery spell, do something for only 2 mana. I think that's kind of crazy, to be honest. We have... This is a fun one I wanted to include. So this is kind of signpost for the Gruul deck. So whenever you're swinging with this guy, if you've got a big creature, you're making a 3/1 dinosaur. If you have a way to make it so this guy can keep swinging, keep making dinosaurs every turn, maybe you're splashing this in a green-white deck, and all your stuff gets counters on it. So this guy himself is a 4/4. The dinosaurs come in as 4/2s. Maybe you could do something like that. There's a few ways to kind of explore that, I think. We have really annoying stuff like Flame Tongue Kavu just being 4 damage on a 4/2 body for 4, which is pretty good. Silly stuff like the Appraiser, so just, discovering in cube, could be fucking anything because you can't really build your deck around it. Just kind of a bit fun. We have cards that weren't designed to be played in 1v1 formats in here, stuff like Iraxa. You're probably not getting off the Paradox effect, but the Battle Cry alone on a 4 mana 5/4 trample is a bit overrated for an uncommon, I think. But you will not complain about that if you're drafting red. Stormkill Artist is, maybe you can have some sort of storm combo. I don't think you can pull it off and kill someone in 1 turn very easily, but I want this to be in here for the possibility. Twin Shot Sniper, one of these great kind of modal creatures where it's either a shock or it's just a creature that comes in and pings something. Top end, we have stupid creatures like this. 5 mana 5/5 reach, trample, haste. It's power crept, charging Monstrosaur. But that's pretty good. Put an equipment on this, put counters on this, do whatever you want to it. It gets enormous and it's very annoying. There's another one from the Doctor Who said another uncommon that's probably way too good. So you can goad their creatures, but the thing you really care about is making it so those creatures can't block. This is a great finisher because it has haste, so it's a 5 mana 5/5 trample haste. Target 2 creatures cannot be blocked, which I think is very, very silly. Is it 2 creatures? Sorry, it's 1 creature. You have to have 2 creatures. Still very, very good. Skyline Despot is the only card that mentions the monarchy in it. You have to really pay a lot of mana for this. So 7 mana, when it enters, you become the monarch. If you have a way to obviously keep recurring this, you can keep becoming the monarch. And you'll make big dragons in your instant if you're the monarch. So it's a big Timmy card. It's 7 mana, but I think it's important to have cards like that in your cube. And red does have a planeswalker. It is Tybalt. So your opponent can't gain life. It's going to make a bodies for -2. So it's going to be able to make 2 imps that block him when they die. They deal damage and stuff. Doesn't seem amazing, but it is a permanent that you can sacrifice to something else later. Each of the imp tokens is, so maybe you can sacrifice them, maybe you can copy them if you were to do that. I think it's just important to have something else for red to be doing that isn't just creatures and instant spells that deal burn damage. I forgot to touch on the blue planeswalkers. They're Narset, which is just card selection, but has that annoying effect that stops your opponent drawing more than 1 card. Excuse me. And Kasmina, which is a looter, but it also makes 2/2 wizards, and it makes it so your stuff is harder to target. Pretty good, but it is a 4 mana investment for a planeswalker that can't plus itself. And then the last one color, the last mono color, I mean, is green. Of course, green is probably the most simple. It's lots of ramping creatures and creatures that make counters, so stuff like Elvish Mystic, Llanowar Elves. Spirit 1 makes counters. We have milling, bringing lands back from the graveyard. Basking Broodstale is part of a 2-card combo. I'm putting this in for now. This is definitely first on the chopping block to be removed if it becomes too easy to assemble. That happens too often. There aren't really tutors in here, so I'm not sure how it is, but Basking Broodstale and Rosy Cotton is an infinite. You win the game pretty much off that. Now, you do need to attack, so it's maybe not an instant win, but it is pretty much infinite creatures. Who knows how likely that is to happen? It's a wait and see. But yeah, a lot of ramp, mana sinks to just make more creatures, more ramp, proliferation, more ramp, lots of ramp, stuff that does something when counters are put on it. So for the green-white strategy, this just does everything. This card's insane. And at the top end, you have some very silly big creatures. You have stuff like the Highspine Wolverine, just kind of is a bit of a toolbox. You have the Galewind Moose, which is just 4 great keywords stapled to a big body. The Ent, which wields itself. You have this guy, which can search up deserts, which means you can get your fixing lens for if you want to splash 3 colors, or even just if you're on 2 and you just want that consistency. These kind of dual kind of purpose adventure creatures. Palaka Worm is probably one of the best uncommon creatures, the best big Timmy ones, because it's 7 mana, 7/7 on ETBs, gains 7 life. When it dies, draw a card. And it has trample. Very annoying if someone reanimates this. You would honestly just play this in blue-black if you found it, just to try and discard and reanimate it, because gaining 7 life is pretty good. And if you can reanimate it more than once, you get 14 life. You've drawn a card off the first time it dies. Very, very silly. And green's planeswalker is Jiang Yang Yu, which gives all your counter creatures the ability to tap for any color. Another way to potentially fix, and he can actually give stuff counters too, so he actually gives that ability to something right away, even if nothing has counters on it. Green has the least instant sorceries. There's a few like fight spells. Sprout Swarm is a potential win condition if you have the mana to keep convoking and buying it back. Could be a fun one definitely to try and make happen. Green also has this card from Assassin's Creed, the Acer Escape Valhalla. This shit I think is crazy. I think this is going to be very hard to deal with in a limited format. But I think, having a powerful card like this, especially in a color like green, I think is very interesting. So you exile a card from your graveyard, so that's good for the Golgari deck right away. Gain life equal to its mana value. It's just kind of good to have in everything. Chapter 2, put a number of +1/+1 counters on something, so good for the green-white deck as well, equal to the mana value of the exiled card. So that's great. Return the Acer Escape Valhalla and the exiled card to its other hand, so it goes back to your hand again, and you could cast it again. This will keep happening unless they deal with the Acer Escape Valhalla. They need to find enchantment removal, which I think is really cool. It's just this annoying threat that will keep gaining your life and buffing your creatures, and it'll add the sense of inevitability. There's a world where you can make a sort of green control deck almost with this as like a top-end threat, which I think is really interesting. And then onto the colorless cards. I know this is a red card, but it has no mana cost. You can play in anything in draft. Rogue Rack, I think this is a really fun one for the equipment deck and the counters deck to play, but you can kind of just play this in anything. It's a free creature for black decks to sacrifice. I feel like the only thing that really doesn't want this is blue, but that's fine. Blue has enough things. There's some other silly things in here that blue will like as well. We have Gingerbrute, another great one for the equipment and counter decks. Signal Pest, good in anything aggressive. Clockwork Droid is one from Doctor Who. You can exert it and make it unblockable, and then you get to scry one. So you can force through 3 damage and a scry at any point by exerting it. And if you need that 3 damage to win the game, you don't care about exerting it. It's 3 damage. Being an artifact creature, too, that might come up for the artifact deck. Mirror Retriever. This is just in here just to encourage people to maybe try out the artifact combos and stuff. I think it's just a fun little combo piece. Perilous Mirror, way to just deal a bit of damage. Good for the sacrifice decks. Stop. Good unearth target if you want to just deal a bit of damage. Scrapwork Mutt. This is a looter that can bring itself back. It needs a red to unearth itself, but anyone can just play it on its kind of front face, if you will, just to loot away something. It's a 2/1 for 2, which is fine. Vault Scourge. The creatures with Phyrexian mana I'm considering colorless because anyone can play them, just if they're willing to do the 2 life investment. That's why Porcelain Legionnaire is in here as well. It's the 3/1 first strike for 2 and 2 life. Cogwork Librarian. This is the only card in the cube that cares about drafting. So you draft it face up, you announce to the table, I'm drafting Cogwork Librarian, and you can put it into any pack to take 2 cards in that pack. So if you're a combo player, this is the way to try and get your combo out of the pack. It's a bit easier. Or if you really want to make a certain synergy pile, it's a fun way to do that. There aren't any other cards that care about drafting at the moment, and at worst, this is an artifact creature for colorless, so maybe if you have a deck that's kind of strange with the color balance, maybe this is a way to kind of even that out. Kind of don't want to be playing this really. And then some top-end Eldrazi for the Eldrazi deck, as well as the reanimation decks, are Ravager and Breaker of Creation. So Ravager adds Annihilator on uncommon creature. It's kind of crazy, and you can sack 2 Eldrazi. That includes tokens to bring it back from your graveyard to your hand. It also has cycling 2, so you can keep doing that as like a little draw engine, if you will. And Breaker of Creation is just the biggest, tinniest card here. Hexproof from each color. Pretty silly. It's an 8/4, so you can conceivably block this. It's not like an instant win. It's not an Eldrazi Titan. When you cast it, you're going to gain a bunch of life as well. And your lands count as colorless permanents, just so you know. So if you're casting this on curve, you have 8 lands, you would get 8 life as you cast it. Really, really good. I do think a card like this should be a kind of win condition. It's going to be hard to pull off. For instance, Noxious Revival. This is good in obviously the green-black deck, but it's kind of good in everything because you can screw up your opponent's draw with it. You can get back any of your good cards because it's target card, not just target creature. So if you have a kill spell and you've already used it and they play another big threat, you're like, oh shit, I'll Noxious Revival, get my kill spell back, draw for turn, kill it again. Just kind of a second way of using anything. It is a -1, but it's a good -1. And for only 2 life, you don't spend any mana on this. Gitaxian Probe is very similar. It's a cantrip for only 2 life. And you also get full hand knowledge, which I think is really strong in 1v1. We have some of the equipments here for the equipment deck. Bone Splitter, Lava Spur Boots, Cranial Plating. This is another one that cares about artifacts. So if you want to make that artifact theme work, there's a way to do it. Mindstone, Sword of Hours. This is from the D&D set, but it's honestly crazy good in a format like this. So whenever the creature attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. Whenever it deals combat damage, you roll a d12, and if you roll more damage, a bigger number, if the number you roll is bigger than the damage you dealt, you put a number of, you double the +1/+1 counters on the creature. So at worst, this is attack, get a counter. At best, this is attack, get a counter, then get another counter, and then next turn maybe you get another counter, and then double that up to 6 counters total. It can really get out of hand very, very quickly. And it's an equipment, so even if they kill the creature, you equip it to the next guy, you just keep going again. Blasting Station, this is a fun one. If you have some sort of sacrifice loop, here's a way to enable that. Heirloom Blade, just to keep a good way to keep your creatures kind of pouring out of the deck over time. The only vehicle in the whole cube, I think, is Night Scythe, just because it makes a creature when it comes in. It's a 3/1 flyer for 3 mana, which is pretty good. We have annoying stuff like Icy Manipulator and Pacification Array just to tap stuff down. So all the fixing lands, I have the Desert taps for 2 colors, but this is tutorable with 2 cards in green. Ash Barrens, just a cycle for whatever. I have all the landscape cards from Modern Horizons, but I also have Ominous Cemetery from Doctor Who. It's an exile spell on a land, which I think is really interesting. And the last one is Escape Tunnel. And then finally, we have the 10 two-color pairs. I don't know why I said 4. So each one will have 3 lands and 4 cards. That's why I was saying 4. So it's going to be the Ravnica bounce land, the Dominaria tap land that has the land types because it matters for tutoring, and it'll be the Thunder Junction deserts that ping. It's the same for every color combination. The deserts are tutorable. The land types, I believe, are tutorable. I think Farseek is in here. It is, so you can tutor for all of those. And the bounce lands, they kind of keep tempo, and it guarantees you have a land drop for. So if you open this and one more land, you're guaranteed a land drop for your first 3 turns, which I think is pretty good. It gives you more time to draw into them. It can let you keep lower hand count hands, and they look lovely in these full arts, which is kind of part of the reason I wanted to keep them in. And they're actually uncommons as well, which is really nice. So for blue-white, we have Momentary Blink, it's a white card, but it has blue flashback. And it's doing something you only really want to be doing really in blue-white for the most part anyway, so I'm counting it as a full blue-white card. Reflector Mage, a very annoying card to be flickering, because you're bouncing their stuff, and you're telling them you're not allowed to play a card named that next turn. So you keep doing that to all their creatures, and you get told to fuck off. Soul Herder, this is your Blink Flicker Enabler. Gets bigger over time. And Cloud Blazer is just a great target for that type of thing, and it's a great flyer. In blue-black, we have Baleful Strix. It's good in everything. Draws you a card, Flying Death Touch 1/1 for the 2 mana. This is your best looter, I think, in these kind of uncommon levels. So 2 mana, just loots, and if you loot away an instant or sorcery, you drain them for a life. And as a last resort, you can pay 2 and sack it to basically flash back an instant or sorcery from your graveyard. Invasion of Amonkhet, this is just a personal favourite of mine. I love March of the Machine draft, and I really wanted to get this in here. Just the front side is great, because it's like, everyone mills through, you draw a card, they discard a card, so instantly it's like a big advantage swing. And then if you do finish the battle, you get to have it become a copy of anything in anyone's graveyard, which is just huge if you're playing a Reanimator deck. Your grave's going to be full of great targets anyway. If they're on a big ramp deck, they're going to have big creatures in their graveyard most likely, so it's just going to be very fun to resolve this in a limited setting, I think. And the last one is Waterlogged Teachings. This is good for the control type blue-black decks, but you can play this in anything blue or anything black because it is a hybrid mana. You're getting anything that's an instant or has flash, which is mostly a thing in blue, but you could also tutor up a kill spell with this if you're in black. If you're in black-white, you could tutor up like the Swords to Plowshares if it's the only way to get rid of the creature you're looking at. Kind of a very versatile card, and of course it's a land on the other side, which is the best thing about it, to be honest. I would have put in all of these cards, but some of them didn't really have relevant effects to the themes I was looking at, so I didn't include them. Then Rakdos, only called Anvil, which I almost said completely wrong. Lagamos, just makes a lot of tokens. Stormclaw Rager, just another March of the Machine all-star. I have a bit of a bias towards March of the Machine, I just really like that set. And this is another Persist combo card, Murderous Redcap. Instead of gaining life like Kitchen Finks, he deals damage, which is very, very good at killing your opponent very quickly. It is red-black, but you could conceivably play this in an Abzan list with Insidious Roots and with your +1/+1 counter enablers and try to combo off. Might be hard to do so, but it is something to, aspire to do. Gruul, we have Stomp Stomp, just a fight spell that's a land on the other side. You kind of love to have an effect like that. Jolene ramps every time you attack with your big creatures. I suppose there's kind of this little sub-theme of power 4 or greater in some green and red cards, and I kind of lean into that a tiny bit, but not overly so. Writhing Chrysalis, I think this card has fucked up Pauper as far as I know, and it also fucked up Modern Horizons 3 draft. I think this thing at one point had like a 60-70% win rate in draft. It was being picked constantly. It's like the only reason its win rate wasn't higher is because, well, the losing player probably also had one sometimes. Like, it was just a silly card. Titan's Vanguard is just another big Eldrazi, and it makes it so all your colorless creatures get bigger when it attacks. It counts as colorless, the Chrysalis counts as colorless. All your Eldrazi tokens are all going to be colorless, so this is just a big anthem every time it swings. Celestia, this is your counter stuff, like I was saying before. Mentor increases the amount of counters. Kadira helps with the go wide angle, so when she deals damage, you get a rabbit token for each token you control. So you're probably going to have a lot of tokens. This is where stuff like the Novice Inspector was talking about earlier, where you wouldn't think a clue token really matter that much for going wide, but this really enables stuff like this to go off and kind of pop off a little bit harder than it otherwise would. The Unicorn combo enabler, but also just aggro enabler because it makes all your stuff bigger. And Kitchen Finks is the combo piece. For Orzhov, we have your classic kind of Soul Sister type effect. It's more of a Suture Priest type effect actually because you're making them lose life as well. But it's on a 2/2 Death Toucher, which is a bit nicer. Denethor from Lord of the Rings. I think this is great because he kind of enables himself. If anything died, he makes a human, and you can pay to sacrifice that same guy if you want, and just drain and gain. And then in the end step, because you kill that guy, he'll do it again, which is pretty nice. Lingering Souls is a classic one. The creature we were looking at earlier, the Flying Vampire, it's kind of a creature version of this. But this is a much better rate. Excuse me. It's actually one of the few flashback spells that's cheaper in the graveyard. So you pay 3 for 2 1/1s that fly the first time, which isn't bad. But then you're paying 2 for 2 1/1s that fly, which is even better. Just a classic card, and it's just great for the Grave Break deck. It's good for just aggro decks. It's good for the Sacrifice deck, a bunch of stuff like that. And the last one is Glasswing Grace. This is just a big aura. Gives something flying and lifelink. Great mana sink later. If you draw it too early, just play it as a land. You don't really care. Is it Expressive Iteration? Just one of the best pieces of card selection ever printed. Improbable Alliance, this is a way to kind of benefit off your extra jaws. Slick Sequence, I said extra jaws, extra draws. Slick Sequence is for those kind of more storm or tempo type ones where you're casting a lot of spells. So you're getting a shock and a card draw in one spell, which is pretty nice. And Saheeli is, it's Blue's third Planeswalker. I'm sorry, blue uncommon Planeswalkers are just better. You can play this in a deck that isn't playing blue or isn't playing red, but as long as you're playing one of them, you can play this, as long as you're willing to deal with the 2 pips. And it's probably one of the best uncommon Planeswalkers ever printed, because it's just whenever you cast a non-creature spell, not even instant or sorcery, just make a 1/1 colorless servo. So you make a massive army and just swing out of it. Golgari, we have the Brood Spinner, which is great for the graveyard deck, of course, obviously it's Golgari. Surveillance too, so it sets up your other stuff, but then later you can sack it and just make an army of insects, which is great. 2/3 reach as well for 2 mana, also very strong. Sidious Roots, it's a combo piece, but also it's kind of ramp because it turns all your creature tokens into mana dorks, and it makes more creature tokens whenever you do your silly grave shenanigans. Rutstein makes all your creatures cheaper while also giving you back one from the graveyard. I really like this card. This is the type of simple design that I think a lot of legendary creatures should kind of strive to be. I know there's a bit of kind of legendary text bloat with Commander nowadays, but I think this is a great amount of text. And Young Deathclaws, this is 4 mana 4/2, not great stats, but it has menace, so it's harder to block. But it also gives every creature card in your graveyard scavenge for their own mana cost, and scavenge is you exile it and put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to its power on target creature. So every creature in your graveyard having that means that late game, you have basically a bunch of extra spells in your graveyard that just buff creatures. It can be enough to really make all your stuff kind of hard to get over. And I like pulling these cards from non-1v1 formats that were designed for Commander products, but it's fun to try them out in these other kind of completely different environments for what they were intended to be played in. Then we have Boros. Legion Leadership is your kind of flip card with the land on the other side, but it doubles something's power and gives it first strike. Good in the prowess decks in kind of red and blue, but also red and white. But also it's just great with stuff again like the Shrike Force. Doubling this thing's power when it already has double strike is crazy. Because with an equipment, this just suddenly gets absolutely insane. Rayav, this is to encourage you to use your enchantments and equipment. So the enchantments I pointed to earlier, they do matter to some extent. It's just not a fully supported theme. You're more so looking for the equipments. And he gives your attacking equipped creatures double strike. So if you didn't get the Shrike Force, there's another way to give stuff double strike. So very, very good. Akiri is another one that cares about equipment. So you attack with one or more equipped creatures, you draw a card. So obviously, if you need to be playing creature and an equipment and then swinging, you're kind of going to be lower on cards. It's a way to kind of refill your hand. You also can make your stuff indestructible, so it makes it a little bit harder to kill. And just a 3/3 is a decent rate to have that sort of effect on it as well. And lastly, it's heroic enforcements. This is just a way to make tokens and buff up your whole board and give it haste and go wide and swing out and win the game. Just classic Boros stuff. And then finally, Simic, Growth Spiral, so a draw spell and a ramp spell in one. Just classic Simic things. We have Kioras in here, is a bit more interesting. So for something 4 great energies, you draw a card, which is nice, but also untap target permanent. This is really nice, and it was another reason why I put in the dual color Ravnica bounce lands, because if you, say, tap one of these and another land to cast Kiora, Kiora can then minus untap the land, you get back 2 your mana immediately. Play something else that maybe will let you play a creature 4 greater next turn to draw off your Kiora, get the engine really rolling then at that point. So, very fun card, can really accelerate the ramp curve, but also draw you cards while you're, really powering out these big creatures. Make your own luck. This is a fun one. I think it lets you cheat on the mana cost, which you're already doing in Simic because you're making so much mana, but you can really cheat a little bit more. Say you cast this, you look at the top 3, and one of those is the Breaker of Creation we were talking about earlier. You can plot the Breaker of Creation, so next turn it's 0 mana, and when you cast it, you're going to gain life for all your lands, and you're in Simic, so you're getting 1 million mana. You can be a little cheeky shit and play cards that are off color in your deck with cards like this. But the fact that you also put the rest of the cards that you don't plot into your hand means this is essentially draw 3, except one of those 3 is a free spell next turn. 45 mana, I think that's great. It's a very fun thing to, like, if you're ramping on curve, you could play this as early as turn 3. I think that's crazy. But Simic, it can be very linear, and I think a card like this that lets you make a fun choice could be very interesting. And the very last one is Drowner of Truth. It's a big Eldrazi that's also a land. So, that is the whole cube. I hope to test it soon on stream, as I was saying. Thank you for bearing with me, if there's any viewers even left at this point. 1 viewer, 3 viewers, never mind, people are actually watching. I thought this would be very dry, but it was very self-indulgent, I did want to get it out. So thank you for staying and listening. And like I said, hopefully recording a session with the cube very soon. I don't know if it'll just be a 4-person draft. Also open the idea of bringing in people, turning it into a full 8-man draft, and maybe recording that whole thing. Could be very, very fun. Would also give me more kind of data on what people want to pick and why, which obviously is the key to making something like this a little bit better. Hopefully soon I can also show off the